Hey folks, this is Kelani. We've just poked over into October, which means we're only a month or so away from BLIZZCON 2017. As always, we should expect an amazing time for anyone attending in person, and this year the virtual ticket promises coverage of more or less everything that happens at BLIZZCON, so anyone who is stuck with the virtual experience doesn't actually have to miss anything this time around, which is really exciting. BlizzCon is always chock full of new information about every Blizzard IP, so let's have a look at what we'd like to see from BlizzCon 2017. So the most obvious thing anyone playing World of Warcraft could ever wish for, a new expansion. We're about the right time. We should be heading into the very last raid tier and thus one of the last patches of Legion sometime just after BlizzCon is over, so it seems that we're ripe for a new expansion. Hints and whispers of what's next have been floating around for the majority of the year. Will it be related to the old gods? Do we venture farther into the void? What about Kulturas and Jaina? There's still lands out there waiting to be explored. Perhaps the most telling clues are the ones which will come with a new raid. The open wound in Silithus, Azeroth's Titan blood soaking the sand with untold powers, unresolved plot lines from the questing experiences in Legion. There's a lot to build upon. There's so many different directions this could go, because while we will eventually have to deal with the super bad guys hiding in the void, we don't necessarily have to do it right now. I wonder if the dev team will continue the heroes slaying the ultimate bad guys storyline, or if we'll get something similar to Mists of Pandaria, where we take a break from the great heroics and deal with the problems we have at home. Something a little more laid back than constantly fighting for our lives. Surely we have so much to repair after the Legion invaded our home world. We could even be looking at an entire revamp of the old zones again to reflect the damage that was done and the repairs we've already started. It would be a great opportunity to apply the world scaling technology to all of the old questing areas while also tidying up the leveling experience from 1 to max level. Unfortunately, that is a huge undertaking, and I would hate for an expansion to release with lackluster content because they had to spend all that time fixing up the old world. We really could be facing a multitude of themes and stories, so I'm excited to see which story they decide to tell next. Perhaps just as important as a new expansion, I would like to see what the dev team have in store for us between now and the release of said expansion. Obviously we don't know how long they've been working on a new expansion or how far along in the production cycle it's already gotten. I would be very surprised if they're a good chunk of the way through, but from what we've seen in Legion they definitely want to keep the ball rolling. The dev team managed to keep their 11-week content cycle for the entirety of Legion so far, so it would be a huge blemish on that achievement if we still ended up waiting over a year after the last raid tier was released to get any new content afterwards. I wonder if we'll have another patch with something to do with Silithus, perhaps a pre-patch event earlier than usual just to give us something to do and something to prepare for and look forward to. If we end up finishing the raid, flying out to Silithus and looking at this great gaping wound, and nothing comes of it, that's going to be a huge shame. Oh god, the planet is bleeding! But you'll have to wait a year before the pre-patch event comes out to pick up any quests that actually have anything to do with it. Not an amazing feeling. So I could see another small patch coming a little way down the line, say maybe 11 weeks after the raid releases, which deals with the after effects of our adventures on Argus and leads us into the next expansion. Hopefully they'll have at least something ready for us in the content pipeline. They promised we wouldn't sit idle for too long, and so far they've delivered on that promise. I don't think anyone can really complain about the content cycle in Legion. They kept it incredibly consistent, but now they have to keep it consistent while also working on a whole new adventure. I really hope they can pull it off. We need something between the release of Antorus and the release of the expansion, and I would love to hear their plans to fill that void. Now, turning our attention back to a new expansion, there's a few key systems of Legion that I would love to hear the future of. The first would be the Legendary system. If we do get a new expansion announcement at BlizzCon, I would love to hear their plans for the current Legendary system. Will things go forward as a copy-paste? Will we literally just get the Legion Legendary system all over again, but obviously have different Legendaries to hunt down and acquire? I hope if the Legendary system is kept in one form or another, that a few changes are made to make it a more reliable system, something to take the edge off randomness that we currently suffer with. Honestly, I would love for legendaries to be tied to major quests or story events just like the last legendary in Legion, but I can't help but feel we might be better off with a different system entirely which isn't related to gear. Either way, I would love to hear their plans for a legendary system if they plan to include one. The second system I would be interested in hearing about is the Titan Forging and War Forging system. I don't think this will be removed at all. It provides too much of an incentive to farm the same gear over and over again with very little effort. If you go kill that boss again, there's a chance the loot that you already have could be better. It's such a simple system, yet it provides such a massive carrot on a stick. Say what you want about grinding and farming, but it's always been a core feature of MMOs and RPGs, and while I do enjoy seeing items Titan Forge, I would say introducing a cap based on the item level of gear would save a lot of frustration in some aspects of the game. I don't believe normal or heroic raiding gear should be able to Titan Forge above the base item level of mythic gear, for example. I've seen plenty of friends and guildies get frustrated with the system simply because the effort versus reward of mythic raiding has shifted dramatically because you can outgear mythic loot by essentially getting very lucky. I believe there's a greater problem though, when you give players the ability to gain gear that can extend far beyond its initial power level, suddenly tuning and balancing encounters and difficulties becomes very awkward. Do you scale a boss for the base item level of gear people should have, or do you take into account the potential of Titan Forging? If you go for the base item level, some players overgear the boss before they even get to it. If you take Titan Forge into account, then the loot that drops from the boss doesn't actually provide that much of a bonus, so you end up with bosses which don't really get easier even when they're on farm. We've seen this a lot with Nighthold and the Tomb of Sargeras, and I expect we'll see it in Antorus as well. I don't know what the ideal situation would be, but I'm interested to see if the dev team has any plans for the Titan Forging system going forward. The last system I'd be interested in is the artifact system. We've been told several times that we won't be taking our artifacts into the next expansion, so when exactly do we get rid of them? Does their power get drained? Do we absorb the power entirely? There are so many questions about where the artifacts will go and why, not to mention the questions about the abilities and passives that artifacts currently provide. Will some of them be baked into our specs, or will we have to start again and gain those bonuses back in different ways? The artifact system is also a huge part of Legion and gearing up. If we don't have something similar in the next expansion, what will take its development place? Honestly, there's too many questions surrounding the artifact system, and that's why I'm so interested to see if BlizzCon will reveal any plans for our artifacts going into the next expansion and whether or not we'll get a similar system. On an entirely unrelated note, Blizzard supposedly has a few new games squirreled away. There's a variety of job postings for open positions which you can't help but raise an eyebrow at. Even though we had an announcement which basically said there's nothing for Diablo at this year's BlizzCon, there is an open position for a lead production director for an unannounced Diablo project. So while we won't be seeing anything on it this year, that means that there's definitely something in the works. There's also some postings which revolve around an unannounced MMO RTS mobile game. That's a bit of a weird combination, MMO, RTS and mobile, but that's basically a recipe for a game similar to Clash of Clans or maybe even Clash Royale. Something along that type of game anyway. Think Warcraft or StarCraft, but base building, army training, camp invading, and of course it's going to be on mobile. I'd be interested to see how they implement a business model in a game type which is often quite notorious for being very grabby when it comes to microtransactions. It's also interesting to see Blizzard delving a bit further into the mobile market. Previous to Hearthstone, they were strictly a PC gaming company, and Hearthstone took a while before it was ported over to mobile. I wonder if some of the dev teams are confident enough to make a mobile-only game, or maybe we'll see another cross-platform game which has its main focus on the mobile market. We'll have to wait and see. There's also job postings which don't match up with the mobile game, but instead seem to point towards another first-person action game, potentially another shooter. There's a few theories being thrown around that it could be an extension of Overwatch, something like a PvE or campaign game which uses the existing Overwatch characters and universe. It could also be something of a return to Project Titan. MMO FPS have had quite a showing recently with Destiny and Destiny 2, as well as Anthem coming sometime next year. What if Blizzard has figured out a way to make it work this time? Either way, we know it's going to be a first person, and the job listings are asking for experience with shooters. Now, we haven't really heard much about many of these projects, so it might be asking a bit too much to get any solid information on them at this year's BlizzCon, but I would be lying if I didn't say I really hope we get at least a teaser or two. So that's what I'm crossing my fingers for from this year's BlizzCon. What about you guys? What do you want to see from BlizzCon 2017? Leave all your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.